Welcome to the Empowered Spirit Show. This is your host, Terry Ann Hyman. I'll explore the connection to the human spirit in a way that helps to navigate your life, including crisis. I am passionate about helping you to open up to your intuition and the metaphysical world of spirit to find your confidence and your own inner guidance. Take a pause, be inspired, learn ways to show up focused, centered, and more dynamic in your everyday life. Welcome back to the Empowered Spirit Show. Thank you so much for tuning in and joining me today. This podcast is being sponsored by Ritual+Shelter. Are you looking for a magical place to shop and hold space? Check out Ritual+Shelter online or in Homewood, Alabama. Browse through their bookshelves covering topics such as energy healing, Reiki, chakras, auras, accessing the Akashic Records, shadow work, astrology, and earth-based healing. You can also find herbal teas and tinctures alongside crystals and oils to help establish a mindful mindset and fluid ambience before meditation, ritual work, and reflection. Ritual+Shelter is dedicated to providing one-on-one, in-depth conversation with customers to help them find the most efficient healing methods and resources that match the customer's unique interest and energy. They offer tarot sessions as well as Reiki, sound bowl, and crystal healing. Visit Ritual+Shelter.com to book an appointment and bring peace back to the body, mind, and spirit. Or find them on Instagram at Ritual+Shelter Shop. It's been an unexpectedly intense week for me. How perfect that the topic of today's episode is about spiritual, cultural, and the ancestral aspects of aging and dying. I lost a dear friend who was like an adoptive mother to me. My life went on pause, no podcasts, no blogs. I really couldn't think about anything else. Many people don't know this about me and about my work, but part of what I do is in helping the soul through the transition into death, preparing the body for ritual, and helping the family as well. When it's someone close to you, the work can be even harder, although it does hold great honor to serve at this stage of life. So I took the week off to offer the rituals and ceremony to help the family and to mourn. My Aunt Mickey, as she was known to the entire community, also left me a gift in the reflection of my work back to me, and how important it is for me to talk about this work, even when it's hard, and bring the conversation forward. We are at a time in humanity that is asking us to understand this cycle of life, for death is a part of it. As we talk about in this episode, how we choose to live is how we choose to die. Having a spiritual practice can help you throughout all your life to understand your soul, how you work through the traumas, and what you choose to carry forward. Being a spiritual mentor allows me to live my purpose and to do this work. I wanted to offer another glimpse into the mentoring that I offer. My student Summer came to me with huge gifts she didn't understand, which made it hard for her to trust her abilities. She's also highly empathic and was taking on so much more energy from others that she was getting lost in her own life and who she really was. So let's listen to what Summer has to say.
Working with Terry has helped me to find myself. Like most people, I've been through a lot of stuff in my life, and I had very much lost myself. And working with Terry taught me how to help myself and not depend on other people to fix me or to help me or to heal me. And it taught me that I have it within me to help myself. It's made me a better daughter. It's made me a better mother. It's made me a better friend. I've learned how something hugely important for me is that I have an empathic nature and I take on everyone else's problems, their frustrations, their energy. And I've learned to separate my energy from everyone else's and be able to send people their energy back, to be able to separate myself, to be able to sort out what's mine to deal with and what's someone else's, and stop taking the weight of the world onto my own shoulders.
So yes, I am a spiritual mentor, and I help people tap into their spirit and learn more about themselves, how to work through past traumas, and how to step forward in life. I have many tools in which I can guide you. Want to know more? Schedule a complimentary spiritual upgrade breakthrough call with me. Let's talk about how I can guide you into building your practice, help you move through difficulties in life, transitions, even end-of-life transitions, and find the love for your soul that will inspire you. You don't have to wait for trauma, for devastation to build a spiritual practice. Links will be in the show notes. In today's episode, my guest is Kelley, Harrell, who explores the spiritual culture and ancestral aspects of aging well and presents practical exercises and rituals to help you intentionally craft yourself as a fit elder on the path to ancestorhood. All of this is in her latest book, From Elder to Ancestor, Nature Kinship for All Seasons of Life. And she explains the importance of creating a direct personal connection with nature and of respecting the spirits who surround us, including asking their permission before engaging them in ritual or healing work. So in this episode, we explore the concept of animism, how it is key to becoming an elder who will go on to become an ancestor. We examine what it means to die well, the deep spiritual work with the sacred self, deathwalking, and what that means, the role of a death doula, dying well, and the oneness that this work brings forward. Before we begin, let's take a moment to pause and center and set an intention for where you are. So wherever you are, if you can, close your eyes. Taking a nice deep inhale, breathing up the body. And as you exhale, bringing that breath all the way down, slowing down. Taking another deep inhale, breathing up the body. And as you exhale, call all your energy into you. Call it in. Taking another deep inhale, breathing up the body. And exhale, aligning all your energy, feeling the spiritual body right on top of the physical, the emotional, the mental bodies, centering. Inhale, expanding the breath up the body. And this time as you exhale, dropping right into the deepest part of your heart. Feeling that connection. Your spirit and the greater spirit, source, creator, God. Know that you are loved, guided, protected. Feeling all this energy coming in around us as we call in the Reiki masters, the teachers, the archangels for joy and love, the crystal beings for amusement, magnification. Calling in your higher self, allowing the alignment right on top of the crown to bring all of this wisdom forward for you. Taking a moment, noticing where you are on this great wheel of life. Where I am, we find ourselves moving through summer. And as I teach in the medicine wheel in the direction of the south, where we honor the divine feminine, we find patience to allow for the growth to come forward. We honor this connection with Mother Earth. To the south, the west, the north, and the east. Above us, Father Sky. Below us, Mother Earth. And right into the very center, deep into your soul. Setting an intention, your path, your work. Feel it deep into that soul. Know it and hear it, see it, feel it. And allow the elevated emotions, how you want to feel, from these intentions to radiate out all around you. Programming your aura, setting that energy. Taking another deep inhale. And exhale, breathing all the way down, feeling the heart open, feeling the third eye illuminating. And as you're ready, blinking the eyes back open, coming back. So my guest today, S. Kelley Harrell, is an animist, death walker, and death doula. Through her nature-based soul-tending practice, Soul Intent Arts, she helps others ethically build thriving spiritual paths through ruin work, animism, ancestral tending, and death work. She is the author of several books, a teacher, as well as a podcast host. She lives in North Carolina. So let us welcome her to the show. Welcome, Kelley.
Hi, Terry. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you, and what an amazing topic that you have with your book, From Elders to Ancestors. I find it fascinating, and the way that you're bringing in nature kinship is so needed right now. So thank you for this work, and congratulations on yet another book.
Thank you so much.
So I'd like to just kind of start a little bit and ask, before we jump into the book, like, what led you to writing this book right now?
Indeed. Being in this awkward place between having parents who are aging and children who are aging into this world, this version of the world. And I felt like I needed to really understand how I am doing what I do here, how I'm bringing what I bring here, and feeling like I did not have preparation for it. To be blunt, feeling like I did not have the elders who were connected into nature and could help me hold that and bring my own wisdom to that, my own experiences, so that I would know how to hand it down to my children. And that left me feeling like, what if I don't die well? What if I don't die quietly, peacefully, reconciled? And so it really prompted me to get busy.
Wow. Wow. I have to say that I've had so many conversations around this lately, very sensitive, very deep conversations, and not a lot of great answers. Soul searching for sure, but I do think it's an important aspect. And what you mean by, dying gracefully and living and having those ancestors and being with earth. I always laugh. I love my mother. I always thought I was just like my mother, but I'm actually so much like my father. He loved the earth. He left us some land, and I go there and I sit there and I have a medicine wheel on there and I love the land. My mother's family were farmers and they lived on the land. My mother could have cared less, right? So it kind of like skipped around, which is really funny. But I love that concept and the idea because I don't think it's talked enough about. And I do think we need to have a way to connect all of this back together in this fast, crazy, concrete jungle that we're all living in. How can we get back to earth? And why is it so important to be with nature? So I think that's a great way to bring this forward in your book. So you talk about animism. What is that and how does that relate?
Animism is the awareness that everything is alive. Like some people word that as everything has a soul, everything has consciousness. And within that consciousness, we're all in relationship. We're not individuals just doing our own thing. We're in relationship with each other, human and other than human, all the time. And in that relationship, we have agency. Like we do things, we accomplish things. And our agency has impact on all of those relationships. So there's this sort of interplay, this reciprocity that's happening all the time at a conscious or unconscious level. And it's a path of deep responsibility because of that. And the idea is that animism is realizing that we are not part of nature, we are nature. We are related to everything, ecosystem other than humans, human persons. We are all related. How are we going to live out of that in a way that blesses us all?
I love that. It's kind of like what I talk about, like everything is energy. From the book to the chair to the crystals to us, like everything is energy. So everything is alive. I totally agree with that. Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think that whole idea of direct relationship with nature. I think before we hit record, I was saying I just wrote a blog about seeing these kids. They're all like spread out on the concrete. And yet there's this beautiful patch of green grass. Like, What is that about?
I tell you, it's different with Gen Z and going forward. Their relationship to the outdoors is really different than ours was. And I think it's going to be challenging for them to thread together their needs being met by American settler culture and understanding that they have to log out sometimes. for that to happen. I'm in no way poo-pooing tech because I love it. And that generation doesn't know life without it. At least we did. But generally speaking, like we have to know what our direct relationship to nature is, and nobody can tell you that. You have to feel it. And if you're able to be outdoors to do that, then by all means, in your own ecosystem, your own yard, walking around, who's there, what do they need, what can you give, how can you give it, and saying what you need. Your ecosystem is your first place of earthly support. Like in some cases, even before other humans, because they're spun up doing their own thing. Nature's just being nature. Nature is your ecosystem is doing what your ecosystem needs to do. Being able to tap into that is everything to find your place in it.
I agree. I think it's such a great reflection back to us too. Yeah, it really is. And just that whole idea. I know all my teachers, most of my teachers anyway, they always say when I'm troubled, get outside. What can I do? What can I get outside? Just get outside, listen to the wind, put your feet on the earth. And I so agree. Right. And I think that we have to remind ourselves to do that because we're living in this concrete jungle, busy, busy, busy. And I agree. Tech is here. We're always going to have it. But to what extent? Right. And just studying the brain, every time we go like this, it just like stimulate, stimulate, stimulate. And then we get off of it and we got to get back on it. Whereas with nature, it does take a few minutes that we have to like really let ourselves calm down. And I know many people come to me, I can't focus. Like I can't sit still. I can't focus. But this is how we do it. We find the ability to be on the earth and it will help us. Yeah, for sure. Now, you get into the whole idea from elders to ancestors, and you talk about the idea of dying well. Let's talk about that.
Yes, which by default means there must be a not dying well. How we live is how we die, right? I mean, if we live a life where we are imparting our wisdom, increasing our skills, sharing our knowledge, then we are much less likely to be holding on to our trauma, our unexpressed stuff at the point of death. And we all have it. Like we all have some depth of trauma that we're dealing with sooner or later in our lives. So how we manage that when we live has everything to do with whether we die well. If we don't manage those things, if we're not in community with others who understand this and hold space for us and us for them to be able to deal with our trauma, then we take it into our death. And I still encounter so many people who have this awareness that at death, we're good. We're suddenly wise. We're absolved of all of the stuff we did wrong. All of our gifts and strengths are immediately imparted. And my experience is that that is not the case. There is a process. And the next thing that people typically say, well, isn't that what our spirit allies do? Isn't that their job? If it was their job, we would not have unquiet dead. Yes, they have a job. They have a part in it. But we have an active role in how we die and how we help others to die consciously as well. And we're not doing that. We haven't been doing it for a very long time. So ideally, we're having these conversations at the dinner table while everyone is well and capable of having them. But that's not what happens. And I don't just mean funerary rites. Who's going to say the eulogy? What are we going to have for lunch? What music is going to play? Where am I going to be buried? Or where will my ashes be scattered? But how will we bless my body to be finished here? How do we close out the energy field of my body? How do we determine who's going to be the next elder? Who's going to take my energy lines that need to move on elsewhere, back to nature, back into the family? Who's going to do that? And often it's not who we think it's going to be. Like it may not necessarily be the next oldest person. And so we need to be able to have these conversations so that everybody knows what's going to be needed at death, but also so that we understand all of the things that need to be witnessed have been, what can be released has been, so that it isn't taken into death. And when it is taken into death, we feel it. The living feel that. That is what we call haunting. That's what we call hungry ghosts. And I can't remember. There's another phrase that people often use around that. But we feel it in our own family lines, the intergenerational trauma. That's what I was trying to say. We feel it, and we feel it in our systems. We feel it in our communities when they have not moved on.
Interesting. Yeah. Haven't thought about it that way, but yeah, I mean, it does make you wonder why energy hangs out, doesn't move on. I wonder too, and maybe there's not an answer to this question, but if we aren't living well and resolving that trauma, do you think we hang on longer and longer? It takes us longer and longer, even though we know maybe we're on the deathbed and we can't seem to let go. Do you think that has anything to do with it?
Well, my death doula training and experience sitting with people who are dying is they hang on if they're worried about their loved ones. Like that's the number one reason that people hang on when they really need to just let go. So, I mean, there is something to that space. There's something that hasn't been imparted. There's a worry. There's a tension that hasn't been able to be let go.
Yeah, it is fascinating though, and how our soul does choose to die. And the work that I do in my community here, I've seen, people that, even like my mother, like her body was falling apart, but her mind was great. And then a dear close friend, her mind was falling apart and her body was great. It's like, which is it? How do we get there? How do we know? Right? And I don't know if there is an answer for that. I really don't. Maybe it's generational, maybe it's not. But I do think that some of what you address in your book, especially with the idea of rituals and having the conversations, is a really important aspect to start having in our families. I really do.
I think that elders would have been able to address some of what you're saying. Like they would have been the ones that they hold this wisdom. This would not be new. This would not be a revelatory conversation. We would know, we would have community. So we wouldn't be the only one having these conversations and holding this space. They would be able to intervene and say, let's all support her so that she feels safe enough to move on, so that she knows that she's leaving behind elders who are looking after the descendants, looking after the community, but also holding space for her to become the ancestor that she needs to.
So that's very interesting because it crosses into different realities as well. I think many times in our culture, people think, oh, they're dead, they're gone. But you're having a different perspective on that.
I do have a different perspective. So like, when they die and they have not moved on well, we still feel that. And even bigger than that, we have not done death rites properly for thousands of years. We have had so many interjections that have usurped our rituals that work. And I don't mean any specific group, like our indigeneity is disrupted in so many places and historically, and that relationship to land matters. That's part of our community. So when that disruption happens, we have a backlog, and it's been that way for thousands of years. So we're not just dealing with the dead that we are shepherding now into what comes next for them, but for somebody like me who does death work all the time, it's a dynamic. Like it is an enormous pattern that we have to address as well. And when they do move on well, they are super well informed beings who know exactly what it's like to live a human life. We often talk a lot about spirit allies, spirit guides, and they have more emotional detachment from what's going on with us. They have to, in order to have their vantage point and do what they do to keep everything kind of balanced. We have the emotion, we have the passion. They can't dip into that. And so we have ancestors who, when they reconcile, well, they know what it's like to hold all that passion. They know what it's like to be on fire to fulfill your calling and figure out how to pay the bills. They get all of that. And they're waiting to be called in and be part of our support system.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I mean, our society, it's like, oh, youth, 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 don't age, don't age, don't age. But then that takes it away. And I know, I just had a birthday. So, of course, age is on my mind, carrying that senior citizen card, right? And I feel like sometimes society wants to just throw me away. It's like, here I am, like, okay, she's done her work. Let me go to the younger kids, right? But like, where's the value in that? And I feel like there is a little bit in our culture that has lost the
Yeah.
importance of tuning in to those that are older. Yeah.
Yeah. And we have to ask why. Like across the board, why would we shoot down our best wisdom? Who tends to embody that wisdom that we don't want to elevate? Like we have to ask ourselves, why? Why do we not honor elders in this culture?
Yeah, I think it's something that is lost. I mean, I've done a lot of studies in Native American, and some of my own DNA is Native American. And, it was just like such a thing where you sat quietly and you listened to the elders for the wisdom they shared. And I don't really know where that is in our culture. I really don't. Besides dream time, as a Toltec student, like the dreaming, go in and dreaming and ask and bring that wisdom forward. And I guess that is part of it. And that is part of what you say when they move on to that really clear energy of being the elders in the afterlife, for sure. Now, you also use a term called deathwalking. What is that?
I think people might be more familiar with the term psychopomp in that when the dead don't move on, somebody has to intervene and figure out what's needed. Somebody has to hold the space to engage this being and understand what didn't happen at the point of their death rites and be able to give it and help them in that process of what reconciliation needs to happen so that they can be a well ancestor.
So is that like a medium that brings forward messages of the dead?
It can be.
Okay.
I mean, it can be that. But for me, it is most likely soul traveling out to where they are and what their experience was, not just out away from this Middle Earth strata, but also back in time to, because this can be somebody who died 300 years ago or even 20 years ago. Like I have to be willing to move back into their space and understand on their terms what happened or did not happen that was needed and then be able to give that. So like death walking is people and souls, but can also be old versions of ourselves that emotionally we may not want to let them go, but they may need to be let go so that the next part has room to come in and take up the space that it needs to.
Fascinating. Yeah. I guess I've only really kind of known it through the idea of mediumship or Jonathan Edwards or, Long Island Psychic or something, right? But not looked at it in terms of that. And I do a lot of work in the Akashic Records, so I do in past, but I don't think I've ever really gone into it in that aspect. Something for me to consider for sure. Yeah. Is there an age on elder? When do we become an elder? Is it when we pass we become an elder? Am I an elder? Like, how do you define that?
I think that it's a criteria that is open, depending on what a person needs, what a community needs. I can only speak from my perspective in American settler culture and not having had animistic elders, not having had elders who were deeply grounded in their nature relationships. So I'm approaching it more as a practice. Like there's not a finish line. There's not a point where you suddenly become an elder and you're good to go. I know loads of old people that we would say, hey, that's an elder who they don't deserve to be given that credibility. Like so much of our leadership does not have our best interest in mind. And for me, that cultivation of bigger than self, like oneness, has to be a component of being a good elder. Yeah, I mean, oneness has to be part of what makes us a good elder. We're not just doing this for ourselves. Even from the standpoint of wisdom, experience, and skills, it can't be just about what you have to give all the time, but like what you have to hold space for other people to offer you, to offer community. There's so much more to that experience of elder than that I think is not linear, and we don't really talk about that.
It's interesting. I know for myself, I came back to Birmingham to help both my parents transition and move on. And as an interfaith minister, it's part of the service I do. I don't always talk about the work I do with death and dying. But for myself, I mean, what just came up as you were talking is like for me even to think about like, what is my service right now? How can I help? And I feel like maybe that's part of when we reach an age or coming into this phase of our life, like what is that service? And, I know I've done plenty of good service throughout my life, but I feel like right now I'm in a place where I don't really know what that is. And I feel like that's part of me trying to find what that purpose is with me right now is what is that service for my community? Where can I offer a little bit more wisdom or help or whatever, really? Yeah, and I think that probably is a good part of that idea of what an elder can hold and do and help with. So in your book, you do share rituals, all of these things that can help us to really get back in touch. And really, a lot of them are just even exploring what's already there within you, right?
Right.
Around you,
And
yeah.
I think that's an important point of animism. Like if this is a conversation that other people aren't quite familiar with, we are all born animists. We are all born, it's not this thing from thousands of years ago. It is, and we're born understanding that everything is alive. We have invisible friends. Our toys are alive. We set place settings at the table for our invisible friends to eat. We talk to trees. Like, we get it until somebody tells us, you need to leave that behind now. And so, the ability to bring that into your awareness all the time, it's not completely foreign. You've had that. Like, stand in the recall of how you experienced life when you were a child. What was your favorite thing as a child? What was your favorite thing to do? When I ask people that, they rarely say being on the computer or in my age range when computers barely existed, they don't say, it was, watching television. They say, I liked riding my horse, or I liked my grandmother's cat. We would go play in the creek, like that kind of, there's always a nature component to it. And how do you come back to that? And it is through how you feel. It's through how nature left you feeling as a child. I think it's an excellent starting point for how to reconnect into the world around you now.
Yeah, and I think that's so important, a quote jumped out when I was looking through your book. These times are urgent. Let us slow down. And I think the tendency is speed up, hurry up, get to that next destination. But really, it's creating where you are right now. And I have to constantly remind myself of that too, like slow down for a moment here. I'm in this stage of uncertainty. Just because I'm searching doesn't mean I have to speed it up, right? And my tendency is that, hurry up, find it out, do it now, right? But really it is getting outside. And, yesterday I didn't quite know what to do with myself with my birthday. And, I had a lot of celebration in the morning. It's like, let me just go outside and
I
weed.
get that.
Let me just start pulling some weeds up and feeling Mother Earth. And, sure enough, before I realized it, an hour or so had passed. And I just felt like this wholeness within me. My mother's not alive anymore. And so it's like, okay, talking to her, I know, Bob, you hated pulling weeds, but Dad would have been right here with me, And sometimes I think, am I a little crazy or not? But it is who I am, right? It is who I am. And I think even, coming from New York back to Birmingham, a part of me kind of had to be stifled a little bit. And it's like, why? I just need to show up as who I am. And I think as I show up who I am, it will lead me to where I need to be instead of trying to fit in, right? With the younger generation or whatever it is, right? So, Kelley, how long have you been doing the death doula work?
I guess that to me depends on what we mean by death doula work. So I have been doing
Okay.
death walking since I was really, really young. Like single digits, I
Okay.
understood that I was seeing souls of the dead, and by the time I hit my teens, I understood that they were coming to me because they needed something. And so then everything for me became how to get that education, which didn't exist in rural North Carolina. It took a long time and some bad resources for me to really understand. They're just asking to be seen and heard so that they don't have to hold it by themselves anymore. The doula part of it, so I wanted, this was pre-COVID, I wanted to bridge that spiritual component of helping them cross over and move on to what is next for them with being able to sit the bedside. And so I started that coursework mid-COVID, probably, I don't even remember, and realized about halfway through it that my own disability and chronic illness does not make me spontaneous enough to get those phone calls in the middle of the night and do that work. And so I kind of had to deal with my own grief around that and come to terms with what I'm offering. And I do feel like it is more on the spiritual end of things. And for me, what that looks like most often is sitting with people who understand that they have only so much time left. They have a diagnosis that says, I can expect to live this much longer, and helping them do that reconciliation work, but also helping them to connect with their cosmology so that they're not afraid, so that they can make their choices from a place that is rooted in their sacredness and their ecosystem and be able to go ahead that way. Traditionally, the death doula role doesn't include that work. It is more sort of like midwifing, being a social worker in helping the family and the loved one have the conversations that need to be had, make the phone calls that need to happen, connect them with the resources and community support that they're going to need during the time of this person's passing and somewhat maybe even after. So that's the part that I was like, yeah, I'm not going to be able to just drop everything I have and do that. So I have been focusing more on helping people close out the chapter of their life that they need to so that they can die well.
Fascinating. I think I've really only known, I mean, as a spiritual counselor, studying death and the rites, and we did a lot of the Tibetan rites to learn like how you can tell when people are dying and the elements and all. And so I have that. I have had that studies, but I really never really thought about bridging that whole idea that you're talking about with Deathwalking. I find that really fascinating and putting those two together because I do work with the soul and I do work with past life and I do get into that. And sometimes it's hard to figure out how to talk about what I do with somebody that is really sick or ill, or we're preparing the family. Sometimes it's with the family doing the work. Yeah.
Yeah. I find that often the person who comes to me who has, they're terminally ill, their family doesn't want to know that they're having these conversations. And that's a whole other level of that person's inability to feel okay with what's happening to them.
Yeah. Be okay with what's happening to them. That is an interesting way to look at it because sometimes people will talk more freely than others. And sometimes for me to figure out, well, how do I introduce this idea or how do I talk about it or even ask them what they want can be a little bit sometimes walking that edge, between overstepping and not. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me just ask you, do you train people? Do you have classes?
I do. I do. I help people who just kind of want to have a more animistic awareness in their everyday. Not everybody wants to do death work. Not everybody wants to do soul retrievals and soul level shifting. And so I teach people who want to learn how to be more animistic in their day to day and understand what to look for when they need greater help so that they go, okay, I don't have this skill set, but now I know what's happening and I can contact someone who does. And I also do the deeper training of how to do this work, how to help your ancestors move on, how to intervene when they haven't moved on well, and how to do soul retrievals, how to break curses and deal with possessions so that people can make choices of their own free will in their lives.
That's awesome. Yeah, for sure. So what is your hopes for the book? What is your mission?
I would love for it to have the widest relationship network that it possibly can. I feel like the message of it is speaking to a lot of people. I'm really, really grateful for how it's been received thus far. And I would just love for it to be able to open conversations for people, to put them in the place where they do the work that they need for themselves to be able to then go to their families and communities and say, hey, we need to have these conversations. We just can't be silent anymore.
Love it. Definitely opened my awareness for sure. Yeah. And I
Thank
think we
you.
need
Thank you
it.
for
Yeah,
saying.
I do think we need it. And I do know I sit in a place right now where I'm seeing a lot of the elders in our community leaving. right? And it would be a great
Yes.
way to then also think, well, maybe they're not leaving, as you talk about in the book, and maybe they're still there. And we have to be more aware of where that transition is and open up to the other realities just because we don't see it, right?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Good point. Good mission for sure. Yeah, definitely. And you've written other books. You do a lot of work with the ruins. Tell us a little bit about that.
That's right. The rune work actually started for me even earlier than committing to soul work. That's been with me a good relationship for a long time, and I do feel like the runes are one place as an indigenous oracle that can help people know how to human better. They can help you elder better, and by default, help you to die well and be a good ancestor.
Hmm. Pretty fascinating. One of my first teacher, Catherine, she used to paint ruin sets all the time, and she would use them all the
Oh,
time.
wow.
Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah, for sure. And I feel like you have a children's book I saw in there as well. Or was it a blog, maybe?
There's a book I wrote years ago about helping teenagers who feel called to soul work. It's called Teen Spirit Guide to Modern Shamanism.
Yes, that's what I saw.
That might be what you're thinking
Yeah.
of.
I think that is. And I think our teens need it too. Yeah, for sure.
They do, because they're not satisfied with this. They are not satisfied with what they're being handed, and they need skills now to help them navigate the way through it.
I think they need it, and I know that there are a lot of kids out there that can't focus. There are a lot of kids out there that are feeling left out. There are a lot of kids out there that only know how to use social media and then get caught in that raft. And yeah, I think there's so many other ways. And yet I know that sometimes parents bring their kids to me and they can't sit still. So even to sit still for a Reiki treatment, which to me is just like bliss, right? Like lay back in the chair, right? They can't do it. And for them, it's torture. So I do think we need to have a
You're
way to
right.
start working with our children in a better way and really bring back the earth for sure. So awesome for that. And you have a podcast?
I do. I have a podcast called What in the Weird, which is focusing on working with the runes from an animistic perspective.
Well, I will definitely put those links in. And where can I direct people to find your books?
You can find pretty much everything about me and my work at soulintentarts.com.
Okay. And a shout out to Inner Traditions publishing the book for you.
Yeah,
They're great.
thank
Yeah,
you.
definitely. Yeah. So I love this. I love the conversation. I have not finished the book, and I know it is one that I am going to cherish and look further into. So I am so grateful that you have brought it out. And as we go to close, I do like to bring it back around and just kind of ask you to leave us with an uplifting thought. How do you feel that working with animism and from elder to ancestors can help empower the spirit right now?
I feel like, if anything, maybe the awareness that you have thousands of well ancestors colluding for your success. You have more well ancestors than you have unwell who are in your corner, cheering for you, waiting for the invitation to be active in your life.
Waiting to be active in your life. We have to call them in.
We do. We do. We have to consciously make space for it to happen.
Yeah. Well, Kelley, thank you so much for your work and for joining us today. I'm so grateful to have met you, to your spirit.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you for the time together.
Namaste. Yes. Bring forward your awareness that you have thousands of ancestors, as Kelley says, colluding for you, who are waiting to be active in your life. Call them in. Make space to receive their guidance. We do need to have more conversations around these transitions in life, around our spirit allies. Open them up. Talk about it. Our elders are very important to our community. It is about oneness. Be sure to check out Kelley's work. You'll find all the links in the show notes. Don't wait for crisis or even your dying days to create a spiritual practice for yourself. It can help you in so many ways, like understanding your soul, your purpose, and the lessons you've come in to learn. And yes, I will be offering more work along the lines of transitions, palliative care, and working through end of life for the soul. Reach out, schedule a call, get on my email list. Thank you so much for listening. This is your host, Terry Ann Hyman. to your spirit. Namaste. Hey y'all, I wanted to remind you of two things coming up. One, the Reiki 2 certification is coming up on Saturday, August 17th and 18th. This is for anyone who has completed the first degree level. And don't forget, Freddie Silva's new class begins soon, The Bridge Between Material and Magic. Step into 1,000 journeys and discover places on the land where the laws of physics behave differently and the perception of overlapping realities is both apparent and immediate. Sign up now and receive a bonus PDF of Freddie Silva's best-selling book, Portals, Energetic Doorways to Mystical Experiences Between Worlds, to which I am a contributing author. I'll drop the links for both of these in the show notes.